Welcome to this webinar on dialogue and purpose. As some of you know, Sarah and I are passionate about dialogue, about helping organizations have better dialogues and in support of their goals. And instead of doing webinars that speak about dialogue in the abstract, we really like to do these webinars where we look at how dialogue can support different aspects of organizational life. And last time it was conflict resolution. This time it is formulating a purpose that actually lives up to what a purpose is supposed to live up to. So a purpose that formulating and implementing a purpose that energizes the organization. And this is Sarah's specialty. She wrote the book. So I'll hand it over to you and say a little bit more before coming back and setting the frame a little more.
All right. Thank you very much, Klaus. So a very warm welcome to all of you from whichever corner of the world you're dialing in from. You're very welcome to share that with us in the chat and to use the chat for any questions or comments. So we're going to hear again from Klaus shortly, and then I'm going to be sharing some thinking about formulating a compelling organisational purpose. And then we're going to open it up for some dialogue amongst us. So please just gather your questions, your comments, your observations, your experience as we go through this. And thank you, Klaus. Yes, I wrote a book that was published in, I think it was 2020, just as COVID hit, called Powered by Purpose. And I'm going to be drawing on some of the material in that book. And then actually, I think it's such an important topic that in my later book, which is called Now We're Talking, How to Discuss What Really Matters, there's a chapter in that called Conversations About Purpose, because I think conversations about purpose really matter. I think there are some amazing resources that you can draw on to have better conversations about purpose, and I'll come to that very shortly. So back over to you for now, Klaus.
Thank you. So just to set the frame a little bit, I'm going to talk about why purpose statements are important. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the practical challenges that sometimes prevent organizations to make the most of their purpose statements. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how those practical challenges can be seen as rooted in common ways of thinking about purpose and maybe slightly naive ways of thinking about purpose, how to formulate it and what it is. And then, of course, how dialogue can help us meet those challenges. So first of all, I guess since you're here, you have already bought into the idea that purpose is important. I'm just curious how many people here say purpose is really important for organizations to formulate. Yes. So, but again, I'm going to say some of the main reasons. So one thing is that it really energizes people, and it can create a sense of meaning. You've probably heard the story about the bricklayers where one looks a little bit tired and unmotivated, and when you ask that bricklayer, what are you doing? He says, I'm laying bricks, whereas the other one looks very excited. And when you ask that bricklayer, what are you doing? He says, I'm building a cathedral. So there's something about understanding how your work fits into a greater scheme of things, it contributes to a greater purpose that can be very energizing and motivating. And I think it's also worth saying, one of the things I do is I teach at the Copenhagen Business School, and I teach leadership there. And a lot of the people there are, well, it's Gen Z, right? It's the newer generation. And they write a lot of essays around how to lead the newer generation. And one thing that consistently come up is this requirement among young people that their work should be meaningful. And especially when there is great competition for talent, it's so important to provide that sense of purpose, because otherwise young people just goes elsewhere. It's not so, people who are really talentful, it's not that difficult for them to find employment elsewhere. So they expect that sense of purpose. So this is also why it's almost a need to have, not just a nice to have in that way, or it is. Another thing that is important about purpose is it helps decision making. If you know what your purpose is, and you have to decide between different courses of action, well, it narrows down the possibilities, because you have to pick something that aligns with your purpose, and not all courses of action do that. Then it gives a moral compass also, and I think that is also very important. Again, when choosing between, it's very rare that people pick a purpose that is amoral, right? That's a hard sell. So therefore, when you pick courses of actions that align with your purpose, it can also function as a moral compass. So in that sense, formulating an organizational purpose is great. However, I think we probably can all agree that there are many practical difficulties. Sometimes you can say, well, we have a purpose, but nobody in the organization understands what it really means. Sounds good. We don't know what it means. We don't understand it. Sometimes a related issue is that nobody finds it relevant. Again, sounds good, but I don't know how it applies to my particular tasks, so it's not relevant for me. And of course, then the other one is, sometimes we go out into organizations and we ask, what is the purpose of the organization? And nobody knows. It's in a report somewhere, maybe it's on the wall in the canteen, but nobody remembers, nobody really knows. And of course, if you don't know what the purpose is, you are unlikely to be energized by it. And then the fourth and final problem, which is probably the most severe one, is sometimes an organization say, this is our purpose, but what the organization actually does reveals that there is, they are living a different purpose, and maybe sometimes a less, what can you say, a purpose that is not so easy to get behind and feel that this provides meaning to work and so on. And so that can breed quite a lot of cynicism among employees, because they say, yeah, we say we do this, but actually what we really do is this completely other thing. So these are some of the practicalities. And I think if we should understand why is it, we all understand why purpose is so important. And I mean, how many people have seen the problems I've just related, or yeah, I see a lot of nodding, right? So on the other hand, these are very commonplace. Why is that? And I think one of the reasons that, if we look at some of the early thinking around purpose, there is some research done on leading meaning, the management of meaning. And there they say, well, the purpose is something like leaders formulate what is already implicitly the purpose of the organization. So there's like a shared understanding, and leaders kind of put words to that. This is our purpose. And then the idea is that when we put words to it, we create a focal point, and that then becomes the foundation for the organizational activity. Also, what is recognized in a lot of the early research on purpose is that buy-in is key. In order for a purpose to be effective, people have to buy into it. Otherwise, it doesn't do much. And I think this understanding of purpose, there's later research on, or academic theorizing on this, have pointed out a lot of really critical issues with this way of thinking. So first of all, if leaders articulate the meaning that is already implicit in the organization. What is the contribution that they really make? They're just taking something and saying, this apparently is our purpose. Everybody really knows it. It's part of the shared understanding. Okay, formulating it in a nice sentence, maybe, but that falls quite short of what we feel leadership in relationship to purpose should be. That should be more than that. And also another, and I think more severe problem is many times people working in organizations will have quite radically different ideas about what the purpose of the organization is. I remember this is an example I often draw on. I was working with a public sector organization. Some of the employees the purpose of this public sector organization is, of course, to implement policy. Right? Politician gives us some rule, we implement it. That's our purpose. And some other employees in that same organization says, no, that's not our purpose. We are the experts who have worked with multiple administrations. Our purpose is to provide pushback and challenge policies to make them better, and not just allow politicians to develop policies that we know from experience won't work well. So if leaders, when they formulate the purpose of an organization, should just pick whatever purpose is already there, then which one do they pick? How can you select between conflicting understandings of what the purpose is? Another thing, and that speaks a little to the idea that leaders should provide something more than just saying what the implicit purpose, understanding of purpose is that sometimes we hear leaders formulate something very radical purposes, and that lifts the whole organization to another level. But where does that come from? Because surely that must be at odds with what people are already thinking in the organization. Otherwise, it wouldn't be radical or visionary. And if they do that, if they put forward a revolutionary idea for the purpose, then of course it's very important to say what determines whether follower accept or ignore this vision, whether they can buy into it. And here it is especially important to notice that you might have a vision statement and you might have an intention of how that vision statement should be interpreted, but people in the organization might interpret it very differently, and based on that different interpretation, they might reject it. For example, you might, as part of the purpose statement, you might say something like, we put customers first in everything we do, right? Or we want to be the most customer-centric organization. And the intention behind the purpose like that is, of course, always have in your mind what creates value for customers, right? That should always be part of the equation. But how it sometimes is interpreted by employees is management doesn't care about us. They care about the customers, but not the people working in the organization. And of course, nobody's going to buy into the purpose if that's how they understand it. Another, and it's not quite a purpose statement, but it has part of it. You've heard that's almost like a slogan, like move fast and break things, right? What do we do here? We move fast and break things. The intention is experiment and learn stuff quickly. But how can it sometimes be heard? Sometimes it is heard as, skip quality control and disregard safety regulations. And again, that might be slightly more difficult to. Some people buy into that. Some people might hesitate buying into that. So this shows some of the problems around this idea, you just have to create buy-in. It's not that easy, and especially it's not that easy because different statements can be heard very differently. So what are you even buying into? So what can we do about this? And of course, this is Sarah and myself doing the webinar. So our solution is dialogue, right? But good dialogue. a good understanding of dialogue. So I'm gonna mention 5 things that are really important when we work with purpose. One is be aware of the conceptual ambiguity in vision statements. If we say move fast and break things, what exactly do we mean by break things? That can be interpreted very differently. What do we mean by move fast? How fast is fast? Or if you look at another statement, Microsoft's purpose statement is to help people, and I think their old one was one computer in every home, but they managed that, so they moved on. And now it is to help people and businesses through the world realize their full potential, something like that. And again, very ambiguous terms in there. What does it mean to realize your full potential? That is not at all clear. And people and businesses throughout the world, is it really throughout the world? Is it some part of the world? What counts as a business? Lots of unclear things there. If you move on to something like Google, right, the famous organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Again, lots of ambiguity here. What does it mean for organized knowledge to be useful? For whom and for what purposes, and so on. LinkedIn is create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And again, when are you a member of the global workforce? Lots of ambiguity. Unilever, to make sustainable living commonplace. What's sustainable living? What does it look like? How do we recognize that when we see it in the wild? What does it mean for it to be commonplace? How widespread should it be, and in what forms, and so on? So the first important thing is be aware of conceptual ambiguity. And then, of course, the next thing is to say, when you're aware of this ambiguity, then you have to recognize that the formulation of the purpose statement, that's the beginning. It's not the end. This is the beginning. And once it's formulated, you will go on a journey of discovering what does it actually mean. So you might have formulated a purpose statement. You have something in a mind, but as you have dialogues across the organization, you might discover that the purpose statement that you yourself have formulated means something very different than what you initially thought. But that meaning emerges out of ongoing conversations. So it's important to let the meaning of the vision statement or the purpose statement emerge through cycles of action and reflection. So we try something out. Is this what it means? Then we reflect on it. We say, no. Okay, then what's the next thing we should try? Let's try this thing. Is that what it means? Maybe. We talk to some people, different stakeholders, and so on. And the third one is almost implied by the second, but it's still worth mentioning. If the meaning of the purpose statement evolves through cycles of experimentation and learning and reflecting, then you have to deliberately and actively create opportunities for such experimentation and reflection to occur. You have to schedule in the reflection sessions. You have to schedule in experimentation. Otherwise, people are busy. It might not happen. And the last one maybe would be two more. If it's important also to reflect on who should you talk to, who should be in the room when you have this conversation about what it means. You want representatives from different departments, from different different educational backgrounds, with different cultural backgrounds, to understand how is the statement understood by many different people with what we sometimes call different horizons. And through bringing those horizons together, these perspectives from which people will understand the purpose statement, by bringing them together and having a dialogue, we can merge those horizons, or as it's sometimes called, fuse the horizons. And this is the process through which we discover what the purpose statement actually mean. And often a purpose statement will be formulated in what you could call value-based language, but we have to translate it into different practical and professional languages so that it acquires meaning in a context that's close to the practical. So this would be the five ways of using dialogue to work effectively with purpose statements. Be aware of the conceptual ambiguities of the purpose statement. It's not that it shouldn't have any ambiguity. It's good that it has ambiguity. That facilitates dialogue. Then formulate discover the meaning through cycles of action and reflection. Create opportunities for those cycles to take place. Make sure you include all the relevant stakeholders and focus on translating value-based statements into something very close to practical context. So this is a little bit of a framing of how we work with dialogue and purpose. And then with that said, I'll hand it back to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Klaus. So yes, I'll also share some thoughts building on what Klaus has been saying there about the management of meaning in organisations, the challenges of that, and also how I think organisational purpose can really create alignment in an organisation and get you into some very rich conversations, including, as Klaus mentioned, about the moral compass. And I'm also going to say that the conversation about purpose, I think, is alive and well. One of the reasons I say that, some of you might have come across that book there, Moral Ambition. So this is by the historian, that's Klaus, the Dutch historian, Rutger Bregman, who did the BBC Wreath lectures recently. And he is catalysing a whole conversation about purpose and very much using that framing around moral ambition. He's quite a firebrand. He's waving a big flag for purpose, and he became very well known at Davos, I think it was last year, where he was challenging the people gathered at the World Economic Forum to have a conversation about how the rich elite weren't paying enough tax. And so he hasn't been invited back to speak at Davos. So quite challenging, but absolutely keeping the conversation about purpose alive and well. This book was published in 2024. Okay, so let me share some thoughts with you. I am going to share some slides because there's actually quite a lot of ground I want to cover. If you would like a copy of the slides, very welcome to have those. So let me just bring up my screen share here. And let's just, unpack a little bit more what organisational purpose is. And I'm going to just come to this quote here that I really love from Peter Drucker. As you can see here, profit for a company is like oxygen for a person. If you don't have enough of it, you are, of course, out of the game. But if you think your life is about breathing, you're really missing something. And so, I think what's interesting in the research about purpose, so there's been a growing business case over the last 10 years, and actually there's some good evidence that clarity of purpose, of a compelling purpose, can actually generate strong financial results. So it's not that it's profit or purpose. The way that the CEO of Kiwi Bank put it to me was, he said, we get profit through purpose, because the purpose, as Klaus was saying, creates that alignment, clearer decision making. It's energizing and motivating for people to think that their work is making a difference. So I'm not going to show this video, I'm just going to reference it, but this is the British entrepreneur David Hyatt speaking. I find him really inspiring. I had the great pleasure of hearing him speak directly. This was during lockdown, where I was collaborating with Chris Blackwell and Alberto Otero Gonzalez. We called it the Purpose Collective, and we ran a whole series of webinars, conversations about purpose. David came and volunteered his time for free and really spoke about how businesses need soul too, is the way that he put it, and specifically about the Hyatt Denim Company that he founded, that is located in Cardigan in Wales, in mid Wales. And it's a town that really suffered from globalization. So lots of skills in the local workforce about making denim. But the business sort of drained away, really. So he had the vision and the purpose to give 400 people their jobs back in Cardigan by getting denims being produced there again. And this is absolutely a man on a mission, looking at that bigger picture. Klaus used that metaphor earlier of not just laying the bricks and seeing the brick that you're laying, but seeing the bigger cathedral that you're building. And sometimes you might know, but in the purpose world, we talk about doing some cathedral thinking together, where we're looking up and out at the positive impact you want an organization to be making. Patagonia, often held up as a kind of poster child of purpose-driven business. That's their recently updated purpose statement. We are in business to save our home planet. And that ad there was placed in the New York Times a week before Black Friday in 2016, and Patagonia pledged to donate all their Black Friday profits from sales to environmental campaigning organizations. And this is why they hit the global headlines. They were true to their word. They thought they'd make $2 million, and they actually made $10 million in what some people called a fundraiser for planet Earth. And I think one of the things I've really learned from looking at the journey of Patagonia is, if you are truly a purpose-driven organization, it can create real customer loyalty. The customers love the brand. They pull together when you've got a campaign like this. So that's Patagonia. And in Powered by Purpose, looking at Patagonia and other organizations, this is how I define an organization that's powered by purpose. It's about, as you can see here, having a clear, compelling, and authentic purpose that is both aspirational, because it contributes to long-term well-being of people, of the planet, but it's also very practical. And Klaus touched on this, because that clear and compelling purpose will guide day-to-day decision making. It will make it clearer what you say yes to, what you say no to as an organisation, which clients you do work with, maybe which clients you choose not to work with. And ultimately, it engages and energises people to do great work together. And I arrived at that definition. I'm going to do a shout out for Dr. Victoria Hirth, who's an academic who's just co-authored her own book called Beyond Profit, and she very kindly contributed the epilogue to Powered by Purpose, and she really helped me crystallize that decision, that definition, with her own thinking, where I think if Victoria was here, she would be particularly underlying the part about joining the dots between an organisation's purpose and generating long-term well-being, as you could see in the Patagonia purpose statement. So just a few more words, and Klaus has already touched on this. Why does organisational purpose matter? Why is it an ongoing conversation? As I've mentioned, the business case has been gradually building, really, I would say, since Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, hit the shelves. I think that was back in 2011. And the conversation is still with us. So here's a quote from Paul Polman, who generously wrote the foreword to Powered by Purpose. I won't go through all of this in detail, but what he's saying here is, yep, during my 10 years as CEO, Unilever's shareholder return was nearly 300%, and that was well ahead of the FTSE 100 index, which rose by about 70% during that period. And I think this is what has been catching people's attention. The stronger financial results, the doubling of revenues by purpose-driven brands. They're often the ones that are getting more growth through that customer loyalty, through the inspiration of reducing environmental impact, increasing societal impact, and so on. And there is a good amount of evidence about the stronger financial results. This is some research, rather dated now, 2018, published by EY, where what they're saying here really is, if you want to get that lift in performance and profitability, it only really happens when a purpose statement is lived and breathed by an organisation. If you just have the words, those fine-sounding words on the website or posters on the wall, it's not that gets you the lift. It's actually making it a day-to-day reality for people in the organisation, again, which is where dialogue and conversation plays such a key role. So purpose is not a purpose statement. As Klaus has said, it can be really helpful to have clarity about it, to have it crystallised into 7, 8, 9 words, but it requires more than just having that purpose statement. And so a few words about how you actually uncover those words. I've been involved with a number of organisations helping them to arrive at that purpose statement. This can be a very useful starting point, and I was inspired in coming up with what I came to call this purpose reality checklist by Blueprint for Better Business, who are a UK not-for-profit. And some of these questions are inspired by their work. Any one of these questions could get you into a rich dialogue about purpose. So, for example, question number 4 there, what are the positive and negative impacts that we have on society? Are we maintaining our license to operate or not? What's getting in the way? Or the next question, how are people feeling? Can we give examples of how we, maybe as the senior leadership team or as the board, are responding to specific concerns? I think there is a real physiology about purpose. I think when it's a true purpose, when it's a resonant purpose, it lights people up because they can see the difference their work is making, or they can feel the aspiration of that. So I won't go through every single line of those 6 questions. As I say, any of them could get you into a good conversation about the current reality, about what's going on in the organisation at the current time. I also want to share with you a tool that I've used in a number of different organisations that I co-created with my colleague Ed Rowland, the organisational purpose diamond. I'll come and unpack the 4 points of the diamond very shortly, but absolutely at the centre of the diamond are the beneficiaries of the organisation. So that's the people or the non-humans that the organisation is there to serve. So that is front and centre in the diamond. And in terms of beneficiaries, there might be one clear customer group or client group, or you might have various beneficiaries. You might have the shareholders, the customers, the employees, all as beneficiaries of an organisation. And if that's the case, it can be very helpful to have clarity, as Southwest Airlines has got, about the sequence that you might place those beneficiaries in. So Herb Keller, founder of Southwest Airlines, who've been very successful, including financially, during the 45 plus years they've been in business, where they've turned a profit every year that they've been in existence, and some of their competitors like Pan Am have gone out of business. So I think one of the things that has contributed to the success of Southwest Airlines is having that clarity about the priority of the beneficiaries. So Herb Keller saying here, if employees are happy, satisfied, dedicated and energetic, they'll take real good care of the customers. And then when the customers are happy, they come back, and that makes the shareholders happy. So shareholders are important, they're included. But back to what Peter Drucker was saying about profit and oxygen for a company, they're in their right place, if you like, with employees and customers being given priority. And if you take a look at the purpose statement here of Southwest Airlines, I think it's very compelling, connecting people with what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable, low-cost air travel. So you get a sense of what the real DNA of the organisation is, what's distinctive about them, and also the enduring and meaningful reason that organisation exists, which is absolutely what purpose is. So let me come back to the diamonds then, and I'll just fill this out briefly. So in the South, you've got the founding purpose of an organisation, what the founders created the organisation to do. And there can be real inspiration in the founding story of an organisation. And for example, where Paul Polman became CEO of Unilever, he took his exec team to an offsite at Port Sunlight near Liverpool, which is where the Lever brothers began the story of what then became Unilever in Victoria times, when the population was at risk of cholera, and they wanted to create a soap, and not just as an elite product, but for the masses, to make hygiene commonplace. And so Unilever, when they went on the journey of articulating the purpose, as Klaus has already mentioned, of making sustainable living commonplace, they dug into the founding purpose for inspiration. And that alone can be a great dialogue to have with people in an organisation. And then on the horizontal axis of this purpose diamond, there's the espoused purpose, the fine words written on the website, in the marketing literature, and so on. And then there's the lived purpose. So that's what the organisation is actually doing, regardless of what it's espousing to do. And I think when people get cynical about purpose, or when there are accusations of purpose wash, a bit like greenwash, I think it's because there's a disconnect on that horizontal axis between what is espoused and what is lived. And again, that might not be a comfortable conversation to have in an organization, but it could be a very valuable one to look at where there's misalignment between that espoused purpose and the day-to-day reality. Back to Paul Polman again, just for a moment, but in his book, Net Positive, he writes quite openly about some of the rude awakenings that Unilever had going on their journey to be more purpose-driven, to close the gap between what was lived and what was espoused. And in the North, we've got the true purpose of the organisation, or you could call it the most potent, compelling purpose that really captures the best future potential or possibilities of the organisation that could evolve out of the founding purpose, and also that more of that alignment between what's espoused and what's lived. So I'm thinking here, Klaus has mentioned a number of purpose statements already. I'll throw one more into the mix. So this is Brompton Cycles, the British engineering company who make the fold-up bikes, who've done pretty well in the years they've been in existence. And their purpose is to change the way people live in cities, not just to manufacture bikes, but to create positive impact in that way. And so we can have a purpose statement, and something else that's really happening now in organisations. Sometimes it gets called purpose pillars, where what sits underneath or what sits around the purpose statement is something even more concrete, where there's less of the conceptual ambiguity that Klaus spoke about. So this is how Unilever have expressed their, let's call them purpose pillars, or if you wanted another example, you could look up Kiwi Bank that I mentioned earlier, operating in New Zealand, where they've got 3 very clear sets of purpose pillars, and each year they produce a sustainability report about the impact they're having structured around those purpose pillars. So just coming into close here, 2 more pieces I want to cover. What makes a great organisational purpose statement? I think of it in my own way, in my own mind in this way. It's one that is magic, where the M stands for meaningful, and it provides that sense of inspiration and belonging for employees who are excited by the purpose, because it gives that enduring why, and it helps them want to give of their best. I've already said it, but I think purpose absolutely has to be authentic. It's an ambitious journey to go on. There's no such thing as the perfect purpose-driven organisation, but the purpose casts a direction of travel, and the organisation does its best to follow that direction. So it's what the organisation commits to, not just what it espouses to do. I think a great organisation purpose statement is generative. It leads to those conversations that can get you clearer decision making and more alignment around new possibilities. It's a good test. Is that purpose statement simple and repeatable? So people they just know it. It just trips off their tongue without people having to consult a document. It's generative, it's creative, it's exciting, it's implementable, it's practical, it states what the organisation stands for in ways that can be practically applied in day-to-day work. And the C of magic, finally, is that it creates a collaborative spirit in the organisation. That clarity of purpose pulls people together and creates a flow of positive energy across an organisation so that the employees, the shareholders are pulling in the same direction. And then finally, and I think Klaus has already covered this well, things that get in the way of arriving at that purpose statement. Some people don't even get the need for the conversation, or they just think it's going to be very lofty and not at all grounded in day-to-day reality. So there might be a bit of an educational piece about how practical a purpose statement can be. Klaus talked about there's a cycle of reflection and implementation. Crafting an inspiring purpose statement does take time. Dialogue takes time. It takes time for people to think together, but that is an investment absolutely worth making. I think it's really important to have the stakeholder perspective on purpose. If you're out of touch with your stakeholders, particularly external stakeholders, that could be a block. So weaving them in to the conversation is important. If purpose is seen as being too intellectual or just an analytical exercise, that could be an issue. I sometimes get people in purpose discovery sessions to bring an object or an artifact with them that in some way symbolises the purpose of the organisation for them, and that can sometimes cut through purpose being seen as like very intellectual. I remember at one session somebody brought in an enormous green plastic watering can to symbolise that the organisation's purpose was to do with nurturing talent. And then finally, and I think this is, well, I hope this is where this webinar is also helpful, is I think there can be a lack of know-how about purpose or conversations about purpose, and actually whether it's that purpose reality checklist or whether you might use the organisational purpose diamond, but there are some great tools out there that can really help bring some useful know-how and get that conversation started. So I'm going to stop the share there and come back to our Zoom room and just want to open it up for questions, comments, whether you use the chat, or it'd be lovely to hear your actual voice. So you'd be very welcome to raise your hand physically or digitally. But yeah, yes, please. MW, iPhone. Sorry, I don't know your name. It's not there.
Hello, Sarah.
Ah, hello. I do now know who you are, and I recognise your lovely Welsh accent. Hi.
I just wanted to say that everything that you and Klaus have said has resonated. And as you know, we did an amazing session with yourself based on your book, Powered by Purpose, and established our purpose, where at the time of that, I think we were 99 years old as a company. We have had a transformational year last year where we sold the business and we've gone into new ownership, and we've navigated that in the space of 6 months. And the thing that I'm proudest of is that we haven't lost a single customer. We haven't hit any bumps in the road with suppliers, and we've gone from strength to strength. And it's all because of the work that we did with yourself to establish the purpose and the clarity for the whole team. And what I would say, especially from what you're both saying here, is that it's something to have it in words, but those words have to be in the world, and they only come from behaviors. And exactly like you're saying, it's how do you just, because our purpose is joyful eating, which could be very ambiguous, but then the work that we did with Sarah put that into a contextual language that we can have constant dialogues. And our purpose as well, we feel, is now set for the next 100 years. So I just wanted to say thank you, a huge, huge thank you.
Miriam, I'm so grateful for that update. Thank you so much. I remember very clearly doing that work with you and your sister and the senior leadership team, and to hear that you sold the business going from strength to strength, haven't lost a customer or kept all your suppliers as well. Thank you so much. That is wonderful to hear. Thank you.
And you may remember that there were people in the room who were slightly less engaged than others, but through living the purpose and from having the clarity, I think everyone gets it, which is really nice. And thank you.
Super. You are most welcome. And I'd love to have a follow-up conversation anyway. We could maybe do that offline. Thank you, Miriam. And let's come to Jan. Hi, Jan.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks so much. What an amazing webinar. Thank you for your insights. I'm working on the board at the moment. I'm doing a bit of pro bono. They're a new kind of sort of charity consortium. So they have their kind of founding purpose. And one of the things I'm doing is doing a workshop with the board next week, thinking about how to move them beyond thinking about setting themselves up and what they are about, to really start to think about their beneficiaries and particularly how they move into the space of delivering for the stakeholders. So actually, both the purpose statement, Klaus, and then the beneficiaries triangles really resonating for me. So this is just so helpful. I'm just sort of curious about your experiences around this space, because it's not like an organisation that's old and sort of drifted, but actually it's sort of moving it beyond that kind of founding base of the diamond, or getting that meaning and the purpose into kind of, their stakeholders, their communities.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm happy to share a couple of thoughts, and then Klaus, please come in as well. So I think the Purpose Diamond could be a great resource. As you say, you've got some focus already on the founding purpose. And then if you want to shift the gear to have a conversation more about, North Star purpose or the most compelling purpose for now, there are some really simple questions that can really help along the way. So it could be things like, what's made you proud? What's made you feel proud to work for this organisation? Because I think purpose brings a kind of glow and energises people. When have we had most positive impact, and on whom? So bringing the beneficiaries front and centre as well could be really helpful. And the other thing I've done recently with an organisation, a not-for-profit, was we went from talking about purpose to talking about, if this is familiar to you, the BHAG of the organisation, the big, hairy, audacious goal. So this is out of the classic paper by Collins and Porras about building a company's vision. And if you're familiar with that paper, they've got the yin-yang sign, where they've got sort of purpose and vision and core ideology. And I go back to that paper time and time again. I think it's so well articulated and really puts together purpose and the BHAG. And the BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal that you're going to go after, that would manifest in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, can also just be a really complement to the purpose conversation. So I hope those ideas help you, Jan, and all the best for your session next
Really
week.
brilliant. Thank you so much.
Klaus, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, maybe one thing to add, like when you look at the espoused purpose and the lived purpose, it can sometimes be, the espoused purpose is easier, right? Because that's what you believe are your purpose. But how do you get to the lived purpose? And especially if there is a gap. And I think one of the key tools is to look at behavior. So just look at what are we actually doing, and can we deduce a purpose from that? So yeah, that's really a key tool that I use often to excavate the lived purpose especially when it's different from the espoused one.
That's so helpful, getting it into that kind of tangible, getting the board to move to tangible action. Thank you so much.
And maybe you're sparking that for me, Klaus, that I've sometimes in some sessions, a bit like with the purpose reality checklist, given groups a menu of questions to choose from. And I've said to people, go into a smaller group and just pick the question that's most energizing for your dialogue. And I'm often struck that the one many groups pick is a question to do with contradictions. So where are there contradictions between the emerging purpose or the espoused purpose and actual behavior in the organizations? And if you, as the facilitator, as the coach, have got a safe container, then those conversations can be very illuminating about contradictions. So anyways, Klaus, you making me think of that.
Anyway, we are coming towards the end, but if we're going to send out a recording, we're going to send out the slides. And if you're interested in learning more, sometimes we do open courses, like open 2-day workshops, where we go much more in detail with these tools. It's always very focused on practice, right? Like in this conversation, what do you actually do? What do you do tomorrow? Not too much abstraction. The way we usually do it is when enough people have expressed interest, then we write out and say, let's get some dates in the calendar. So if you are interested in participating in a workshop like that, please reach out to us, and we'll put you on the list of people that we'll contact when we're ready to put something in the calendar. So that's one thing. And the other thing we do is, of course, we go into organizations and do in-house things, which we love, because when we do that, we usually do interviews before the workshop with all participants to get a sense of where are the juicy conversations. And then we don't just practice the tools in the abstract, we practice the tools on the things that organization needs to talk about. So this is another thing that we do. If you are interested or think that are thinking of bringing us to an organization you work in, then by all means, we would very much appreciate if you can connect us to whoever makes decisions about learning and development. And again, you can just write. There should come out a mail tomorrow. And the next one is next Monday. And hope to see some of you there. And if you find these webinars useful, please spread the word. So share the link in the mail that comes out tomorrow. There's also a link where where you can sign up for the next webinars. So please spread the words. The more the merrier. We are, as I said, very passionate about sharing this knowledge. We think it's going to make a lot of people's lives better if we are better at having organizational dialogue. So thanks for coming. Sarah, do you want to?
Thank you.